The trouble with us, we don't use our everyday mind, our ordinary mind, our simply operating mind logically. We fail to use it logically in the simplest of things. You go through your day, you watch as you go through your day, and you see how you can catch yourself in dozens of small, illogical actions or words or thoughts that don't make any sense at all. As long as we're living illogically in our minds or in our feelings, as long as we're living illogically there, how can we expect to be logical toward higher things? How can we be logical toward trying to find our way out of the great mess that we are obviously in? I've asked you many times to always go back to seeing how efficient, how well you can do the simplest of tasks. So you have an envelope with not enough stamps on it. Just see if you can do the simple logical thing of getting the right stamp, of putting it on right, not upside down. Do things right on the simple everyday level. Without that, without that first step, we can't hope to go up to the second, the 10th, and the 20th step, and the endless number of steps ahead of us. So tonight, I want to engage with you in some very simple, powerful logic that will make perhaps what we're trying to do here clearer to some of you who have been here for a while, and perhaps some of you have been here for the first time or new. It will make the whole idea clear of what we're trying to do with our lives here on earth. But maybe I should ask before I get into it, do you have any interest at all, really, in things outside of your business or outside of your family life? Haven't you ever suspected that maybe your life here on earth is for a different purpose than up till now you have imagined? Maybe you're not disillusioned enough with the way you have been living. Maybe your attention all day long for 8 hours is on your money or on repairing your house or some other stupid thing like wondering which political party is the best or whether we should aid that country or shouldn't. And then maybe when you run out of the ego thrill of your attention on these wrong things, you pick up a right book and read it for a half hour or 5 minutes maybe, and relieved your guilt and have convinced yourself that you're earnest about finding the way out, which you are not. There does indeed have to be a great passion for living in a completely new way than we're living now. So with that introduction, please write down the following. You can do it in one sentence, very short. The crying world, comma. The crying world, comma. The battling world, comma. The revealing world, period. The crying world, comma. The battling world, comma. The revealing world. And those three logical separations of thought, and those three steps are listed, everything you need to know as a foundation for making your life quite a bit different, totally different, mentally, emotionally, actually out in the world than it is now. Because you're not leading a new life now at all. I will tell you You will agree internally with this, that at the present time, sitting here, right in this room, you are living in the very elementary stage of life, inhabited by billions of human beings, which is the crying world. See, I've chosen that word very casually and yet very carefully at the same time, simply because it describes our lives here on earth. Only you'd cry a lot more outwardly if you didn't think it was so unmanly, or if you didn't put on a mask of some kind to cover it up. We're quite unaware, every one of us, how easily you watch for this tomorrow, for example, how easily anything can set us off. We're walking sticks of dynamite that anyone approaching close enough can just make us explode in a small way or maybe a large way. No control, no command, no understanding of why we behave the way we do, and no comprehension of why other people behave toward us the way they do, or why events happen to us the way they do. So we sit back and cry, having no idea what to do, and in the dreadful contradiction of knowing that we're adults physically and are expected to behave like adults. All those adults out there at the office or at the home or wherever expect us to behave like adults, like mature people, and so we play the role of it, not knowing anything else to do but to play the role. Do you know that the role is unknown to you, that the role is unconscious? Do you know that all actors and actresses, which we are, haven't the remotest, I said the remotest idea of what is promoting you or me to play the stage performance in order to keep from that other person, from our own husband or wife for that matter, or the boss or whoever, and especially from ourselves, to keep hidden from ourselves the fact that we're scared little children. We want to cry because as when we were actually physical little children, that's the only defense we knew when the tension got too great. You sat back and cried, and you have $1 million and you cry. You have a big home and you cry, and you're young and got it made with the ladies, or you're young and have it made with the men and you still cry. And up to this point, we haven't done anything very intelligent about it, because we haven't known what to do about it. And not only that, but if by chance someone should tell us what to do about it, when we'll get to in the next stage of this, we're unable to hear, we're psychologically deaf, as you are tonight listening to me right now. You don't hear me as I'm talking to you now. You think you do. You hear my familiar words. You even say, I've heard that before. You're not listening to me at all. You're incapable of it. Your psychic apparatus for hearing something higher than yourself is faulty. So I will tell you, you don't hear me. Now with that, you can try to hear. By saying, for example, the description that has been given of you and your life up to now is 100% accurate. You know that. You know it. You know it at night. You know it when you blow up, when you get jealous, when you feel insecure. Well, fortunately for us as human beings on this earth, there is a reaction to everything that happens to us internally or externally. There is a reaction that has nothing to do with crying, with sobbing, with breaking down, and then feeling ashamed of ourselves for having done that, which is the second wrong move. The crying is the first, and then feeling ashamed of yourself is the second. The step out, the way out, is to begin the internal battle, which is simply to work with the crying in a new way, which is simply to learn to cry consciously, to cry and to hear ourselves sobbing, and then do absolutely nothing with it but to see it, without even saying, I am a sobber, I am a crier, because that will perpetuate it. The internal battle that you and I are trying to engage in this class and in our work outside of it, is the one great chance you and I have to not die sleeping human beings. To enter into the battle, which takes a lot of work, a lot of jolting, a lot of learning to listen properly, a lot of abandonment of self-centeredness, of egotism, of unconscious defenses. I said of unconscious defenses. You don't know how defensive you are. You have no idea how defensive you are. You consider at your present stage, you consider the truth the worst enemy you could have on earth. And I'll illustrate that for you, how it happens. The master lie, the foundation lie, L-I-E, the chief devil in you and in me, the chief one, is the lie, the thought, the idea, the imagination, the assumption, the false belief that I or you exist separately from the all, capital A. I am a person who cries, for example. I am a person who can get over crying, the man said. I can get over it. No. The chief devil in every one of us is this lie that I have a separate identity, a separate self. Okay. That's the very foundation of all our misery. Right. This lie, this thought, this belief, this imagination that I am individual, independent, separate from you, has great fear in itself because it is a lie. It's a falsehood. It's terribly afraid. So now the devil is a coward. So what he does, this lie in us, is to collect around, I'm using figures of speech, you understand? Is to collect around him sub-lies, imps. You listen as I give you some examples as they occur to me just as I'm here, and you'll see how true they are. This master lie that I have a separate self, even a separate self trying to find God or trying to be good or other, must have allies which it surrounds itself with. For example, the lie, the imp, that time exists. The idea that time exists is an ally of the master devil, the chief devil. Because memory, being a part of time, memory is what keeps the lie in place that I am myself. You see, so time is just one, so we won't go into that anymore. Or the imp that I must compete with you for anything at all. I must compete. If I am separate, then you are separate, and I have to compete or fight, right, with you. The division. You see, this is now we have just two sub-imps around. You can think of many more, and you think of them in your own life. One of them, listen to how clever this one is. One of these imps around them, the chief lie, is hostility toward the truth itself. Hostility toward the truth itself. A feeling of hostility towards something right that it says in a book, or that occurs to me, or that you tell me I'm a phony. I get hostile toward that. That hostility is my ally in keeping the false belief in place that I exist separately. If I didn't have a hostility, I might see through myself. So it's quite necessary for me to pick quarrels with you, with the world, to complain that I'm not getting enough money. I'd better join some pressure group in order to get more money or shorter working hours, and lie about that, of course, that I'm concerned with the kids at school, which I'm not. Hundreds and thousands of sub-imps collect around me. The more they collect, the more scared I get, because I see that they are phony. So there's a part of me that senses that it's all false. So we have now the picture of this chief devil with all these thousands of hardened little imps working together all the time to keep the chief devil in place. That is what gets up in the morning sourly. That is what gets, you get up sourly. That is what gets up and goes to work complaining about working conditions, how you're treated. That's what goes through the 24 hours of the day. That is what your life and my life is. Now do you see why we're miserable? Now do you see why we cry? The whole thing is false. We haven't been able to collect enough lies, enough strong lies, to protect us from the truth that we're non-existent at all. I don't care if we get 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000, they'll never work. Now you see, the second point was the battle, wasn't it? Good heavens. Good heavens. From the time I first started to think a little bit as a small child, I've been collecting all these hardened ideas around me, front, back, side. I don't want you to creep up on me and back. I've got to put them back there too. I've collected this hardened shell around me since I was 3 or 4 years old, and I'm now 30, 40, 60, 70. Good heavens. What a task ahead of me. Not only that, but one of the imps very, very closely around us is the lie that you can't make it, that it will take a lot of time, that you'll have to throw away one little imp at a time, arduously every day. Oh, get off just a little to cover a specific point. If I could really see through just one of these imps, see through it thoroughly, all of them would collapse. And I'll prove it. I could see one of them thoroughly, the rest would fall away because they're all hooked together. All one, thoroughly, the rest fall away. One of the imps is the idea of time, right? It says that you exist as a certain kind of person which is connected with memory, with all my experiences, with all my heartache and all my joys. If I could see that truly, factually that time is non-existent, the whole business would fall away, including the chief devil himself. Then what would be left? Nothing at all. That would be the end of me, right? That would be the end of me, thank heaven. That's the theory of it, which has its place. We're not that good. We're not that fast. We're not that strong. We're not that persistent. Not that wise. Not that passionate to take one thing and give it our total attention, because we're still wobbly yet. And so we come to a class like this and we learn about time. We learn about hostility. We learn about false identity. We learn about clinging to the past. We learn about if I can just make it in the future, then I'll have it made. We learn about hatred toward our parents. We learn about our love of confusion. And if you didn't love your confusion, you wouldn't have it. So the battle that we have within ourselves goes on from point to point. Each night, each lesson, each book, each page in the book gives us a little more insight into this little demon than this one over here. So they gradually weaken one at a time and they fall away. I will guarantee you that you'll be able to see them fall away, and heaven help you if you live in imagination of it falling away. This is one reason you need the class almost more than anything else, to prevent you from imagining that you're making progress when you're not. You're gathering information, which is progress on the horizontal level. It is not going up. To go up, you must die. Horizontal, you can stay alive and collect all kind of knowledge and write great books, sell a billion copies. So the stage is to battle, and that's why we're here to learn how to fight properly. And when we get defeated, to get up and go right into the battle again. And if you're lucky enough to have a very troublesome person in your life in any way, that is best of all. Because you'll be able to see that you're not kind at all when someone screams at you or bawls you out. That will keep you in the center of the battle. The minute things get calm, you're not working at all. The minute you have the peace of God, quote marks, you're not working at all. The minute you say, I came to the class 5 times and already things are so much better, you're deceiving yourself. You have to get worse in this class. Much worse. You have to be totally shamed. If through all outside help you can get, including these classes, including books, including work on yourself, if you persist in it, you will come to the point, the third point, of revelation, where little by little you begin to see that your first 2 stages, the one we were practically born into, and then the second stage, which we entered quite consciously because we didn't want to cry anymore, you will see of itself, because God is faithful, you will see little tiny insights that are real, that can never be taken away from you, that will guide your life. You know, it doesn't have to be a big thing at all. It can be an increased hunger to read every day, to read the same book. I'm not exaggerating. I am not exaggerating. If you have a right book, if you have a true book, to read that book 50 times, 100 times, so that on the 100th reading, you'll see something you didn't see on the 99th one, because you are changing, because you are learning to see. You are learning to hear. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. That's what it's all about. That's the 3 steps in very broad generalities. And in these classes, for those of you who are new here, the many thousands of details on each step that have to be filled in is what is our purpose here. So that of myself, of yourself, without referring to the book or referring to this class, I will know that I have meaning in myself. I have purpose in myself, which is the simplest thing there can be. I want to change who I have always been. And I don't care what battles I have to go through. I don't care who I have to leave, which you should do consciously, not mechanically, by the way. I don't care what I have to give up. I don't care what egotisms I have to abandon. I am beginning to love truth more than I love falsehood. Now, how much simpler could it be put? I am beginning to love truth more than I love falsehood, and also I'm beginning to be able to distinguish between the two. Before I couldn't, because I took truth as anything that gratified me, that permitted me to stay as the human being I've always been. That is what I took as truth. I wanted something, and in my confusion and lies to myself, I called that the truth. I wanted something, I called that the truth. That's the truth that will set me free, and it never did. And that's one of the lies I could begin to work on, to begin to drop around myself. Until, I'm using figures of speech, and they break down after a while, but I'll continue with this. I've got rid of a few of these lesser imps. And finally I get to the main one itself. I'm not exaggerating. I'm telling you, there are no words I can give you tonight to express the horror, the emotion that will pass through you when you see clearly the last step, the final step that you have to take. And I must tell you that you will be taking it, we'll be taking it all our lives. But you see the task, which is simply to give up the notion, the imagination, that you are someone who has the right to blab about yourself all day long. Because you're the only person in the world who's ever had trouble, see? You're the only person in the world who's ever needed help. You're the only person in the world who's ever cried about anything. Now, you give that up and spend the rest of your life trying to do it. You spend the rest of your life trying to do it, and you'll have spent your life wisely, intelligently. We'll discuss this more when we come back, but let's take a break now. Can we simply understand that when we're in conflict, when we're in tears, when we're battling something inside ourselves or outside ourselves, there's something wrong with me. Could we simplify it to that point? Or haven't we even taken the energy to see myself in a negative state throughout the day, or in 1 second of the day, or whatever? And say, if I am disturbed, then there must be something in me that is causing me to be disturbed. You take that single, simple sentence and track it back. And it may be the first time in your life you have ever done that, which means it's the first time in your life, or in my life, when we have taken right responsibility for ourselves. If I am jealous, if I'm angry, if I'm demanding something from you, there is something wrong with me. Stop there. So that I don't have to pay the price for it anymore. I pay the price for my pretense of knowing these things. I pay the price of it. I pay the price of behaving in a certain way toward you so that you will like me. Or it could be the other side, so that you'll dislike me and I'll get your attention either way. I don't care how I get your attention. I may behave like an idiot just to get it. There's something wrong with me. I'm trying to do the impossible of proving that I do exist as a separate self, which is a delusion. So I can call a halt to it if I want. And feel consciously all the fear that I've lived with up to this point in my life. Isn't that great? Isn't that nice to know that I don't have to hide my hatred toward you anymore? Isn't that nice to know that I don't have to hide it and feel guilty about it because it's socially unacceptable, and also it opposes my image of being a pretty nice man? What liberty to know that I can see my hatred without identifying with it, without saying I am hateful, which is one of the imps I've built up. Understand? You watch yourself the next time you're in an angry mood, and you will be one with it. You will be it itself, that anger. And that anger, or whatever, that bitterness, is serving the false purpose. Listen to this. It's incredible. That anger is serving the false purpose of keeping me miserable. But I would sure rather be miserable than be non-existent. Why don't you try being non-existent sometime and see whether you miss your misery? I said, see if you can be non-existent sometime and see then whether you miss your misery. You won't. False sense of self loves its misery, which is self-love. I will ask you a question. In your individual life, you listen to this now, you had better make this personal. In your individual life, what are you trying to hold in place? your friends, your family, your philosophy, your money, your ideas about yourself. Whatever you are trying to hold in place is eluding you every second. It's getting away from you every second. And it wears you out trying to keep it in place, doesn't it? Trying to keep your business going. Trying to keep your wife faithful to you, your husband faithful to you. Try to keep your friends liking you. Try to keep your delusions in place, your daydreams in place. Isn't it a terrible thing to try to keep our so-called life in place? Doesn't it drain the life out of you? Doesn't it make you nervous? Doesn't it make you irritable? Why don't you just give it up? Why don't you give up as of this moment tonight? Why don't you give up trying to keep your life in place? When you do that, you will see that you were doing a false thing all your life of trying to keep it in place. Because there's nothing there to keep in place but your own thoughts about it. Anyone in this room who still wants to be somebody? You want to be somebody? You want to be famous and rich? You want to be loved? You want to be loved? You never will be. You're not going to be loved. No one is going to love you. I said no one is going to love you. Because you want them to. Which means you don't know what love is. But maybe that will keep me in place if you love me. It'll keep you scared. Okay, would you like to discuss things? Like to talk a little bit? Or ask questions? It's not necessary if you don't want to. Don't you avoid anything. This is what you've been doing all your life, you know. You've been avoiding the crisis, haven't you? The crisis of seeing what you really like. Right? Right? Avoiding the crisis of seeing what you really like. Don't avoid that crisis anymore. Avoiding the crisis that event should turn out according to your expectation, or your so-called prayer, or your hope, or your belief that you should now be rewarded because of the hard work you put into it. You should now be rewarded, and it's only fair that my business thrive and that my friends are loyal. I deserve a reward for being good, but I'm not good at all. That's an imagination that I'm good. You can avoid it all your life if you want, and all your friends will help you to do it. They'll help you avoid it. They'll help you be miserable just as you're helping them be miserable and hostile. If you touch that nice friend of yours in the wrong place and watch him flare up, and you don't have brains enough to see that he's not your friend at all, that's how dumb you are. Wake up. That lady friend, that boyfriend, in one sense, don't be careful at all in dealing with people. And when you're real, you want to be careful at all. to be very easy. If you're dealing with animals out in the world, you'll know you're dealing with animals, and you'll know how to deal with animals. And the main way to deal with animals is to stay away from them. Let them congregate in their own zoos. One minute, please. And if you're dealing with yourself, you'll increasingly know how to deal correctly with yourself. And the best way to deal with yourself right now, whatever level you are now, is to get as tough as you can with yourself. Don't spare yourself anything at all. Can you do that? You know what it means to get tough with yourself? It means on Sunday, if you don't want to get up and give a talk, you give a talk. That's getting tough with yourself. It means you're afraid to ask the grocery clerk something, the price of the can of corn, you ask her the price of the can of corn. If she owes you a penny, ask for the penny. On. Where you're afraid to do something, you do it. Not something stupid, not something idiotic. Something that can be done, that's normal. You're afraid to do it, you will do it. You will do it shakingly, but you will do it. Then you'll do 10 more things that same day if you can, even if you're all alone. For example, you can do refusing to get irritated over anything that happens in the home. The mail didn't come, the letter didn't come that you're so eager to get. You spilled something of ink on your nice, pretty new dress. You have the courage to get tough with yourself to say, I am not going to be irritated. And listen to the devil scream at that. Yes. Nice and loud, please.
Well, how do you deal with your own thoughts outside of observing them when, like, outside, a road or a street would remind you of something, and then you see that your thoughts automatically go in a certain direction outside of observing them, watching them, how to deal with them better?
If you see them, and if you see that they're wrong thoughts, and you love truth more than you love falsehood, won't you drop them? But you know what the difficulty is? Recognition. Knowing a wrong thought when we see one. And something higher than our own thoughts can do that for us if we'd let it. You want to ask that question again, or try again, or are we all right up till now?
Yeah, what you're really talking about is for us to go into something unknown then.
Sure.
Why do we fear going to the unknown?
Because it's the end of you, which is the known. You know who you are, don't you?
We fear leaving the known.
Yes. You fear leaving your labels.
Why?
Because that's the end of you. That's the resistance there. That's the end of you.
Then there is security in the known.
Pardon?
That we have a security in that known.
No, if you say I have security in the known, that's the old trying to hang on to it.
That's what I mean. That's why we fear leaving it. Because
I'm not following you.
there is a certain amount of security in the known.
Oh, is that what you said?
Even though we're miserable and stuff, there is security in that.
Well, there's no security. There's familiarity, which gives the illusion of security.
Yeah, right. That's another imp.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Is the familiar the right? Necessarily? open discussion pretty much this morning. But before we get to it, a few points. If gentleness won't teach the lesson, then sternness must. If gentleness won't teach the lesson, then sternness must. You're treated very gently in here, very gently, because this is all you can take. You can't take individual or very little individual reprimand in the group. It has to be mass reprimand so that you can spread it out in the rest of the room. So you're treated very gently, which unfortunately means that you don't hear. Because when you're talked to in a nice, quiet way, there's no emotion involved. Therefore, your emotions, not being involved, can't hear. If you're treated sternly, on the other hand, individually or in the class as a whole, then your emotions are involved because you resist it, resent it, wonder why it was said to you, or just plain go into general confusion about it, not knowing what to do with it. But if when treated sternly, you were trying to stay awake, you would then hear in a different way, which means this. You would simply hear yourself responding to what was said to you, and it makes no difference what it was said to you. That's not important. Even if you were accused unjustly or something, that's not important at all. The important thing is to hear yourself react emotionally. Hear it, see it. Can't you hear yourself screaming in resentment or in anger? Can't you hear yourself? Maybe you haven't practiced to the point where you can do that, so that you can take the next step of not identifying with what you heard yourself react to. Your own reaction, that is. In this world, out in society, everybody is treated gently. That is, with phony sophistication. Everybody has a mask on, being nice to each other, saying the proper things for the proper occasion. No matter what it is, everybody conforms to what everybody knows their behavior should be. Congratulating the bride or the groom, or shedding the proper tears at the funeral, or whatever. People behave so as to not upset the boat. All human beings have a mutual agreement in themselves to keep each other deceived, asleep, by speaking gently. And then, of course, because it's false, the opposite will come over sooner or later, and then you fight with the person you sympathize with or sentimentalize with just an hour ago, and you hate the person you loved, or said you loved an hour ago. In this class, you have an opportunity to be consciously dealt with in a stern way, consciously bawled out, not very much because you can't take it, but some. And you also have the opportunity, the great opportunity, of watching yourself hear the bawling out at the same time it is going on, not afterward. If you see it afterward, it's too late. Now you're depressed with the mask. You don't show it. You're too good an actor or actress for that. Or walk out wondering why it should have happened to you. But this is the road to help, to be able to take any kind of reprimand or bawling out that is given to you in this class. And if I see you can take more, you'll be given more. So remember, the more gently you are treated here, the less you are learning. It'd be nice to see what happens if I were to talk to you individually sometime and see what your reaction would be if we were talking all alone. It would be quite different because you're safe here, surrounded by other people. You're not safe when you're all alone. You have nothing to distract you. You're looking at that mean man talking to you. Because you've never known what to do with your life, you don't know what to do when that was said to you. That's because you still think that you exist as someone who has the reaction if you could just find it. You'll never find it. So, following that up a little bit, please write down a sentence, and then we'll go into the heart of it, as follows. I perform the lesson superbly, comma, fairly, comma, dumbly, period. You see, we don't remember things. This is our chief difficulty. We can't remember the simplest of assignments, the simplest of lessons. At the end of this class, when it's all over, let's see how many of you, you have to do it yourself. I'm not going to check up on you. Maybe I might. At the end of this class, you remember what I'm telling you now. You understand I'm telling you something now, and you individually are to remember what I'm telling you. And when the class is all over, you're to underline which of these three applies to you. You see, you're grading yourself. The purpose of this is not the imitation of a classroom technique, but to give you an opportunity to be aware that perhaps you didn't follow the assignment. You didn't listen to what was told because you were distracted at the time, and therefore you couldn't remember it. So listen carefully to what I'm going to say now, and at the end of the class you grade yourself. We're going to have open discussion from now on, and questions, comments, anyone. You are to observe the person asking the question or making the comment. You're to very carefully, without staring at him, of course, and you're to try to find out as many things as possible about the person asking the question. For example, what motive might, you're searching it out, you understand? What motive might that person have had for asking that particular question? Was he using it just to give a short speech under the guise of asking a question? What was his emotional state in asking the question, which you can tell a good deal about? What was his facial expression? What did that tell you about the person asking the question? A general observation of the person asking the question, trying to find out everything you can about the psychology of that person, which you'll do better if you completely forget what he or she looks like physically. If you're distracted by that, you won't be able to see them clearly. That's part of it. The other part is the person asking the question or making the comment this is part of what you're to check up on at the end. The person asking the question or making the comment, even while you're talking here in class, you're to turn the arrow back on yourself and do exactly what the other people are doing to you. You're to find out what your motive was in asking that. You're to see whether you ask it nervously. The whole story. If you do it very carefully, you might be quite surprised at what you see in yourself. And as a side benefit, a person who does not ask a question at all, you might ask why they don't speak up at all. Why is that person always silent in class? Why is he or she playing it safe? By not being observed by the rest of us or by himself. Now, what is the purpose of all this? Not as a little parlor game, certainly. What is the purpose of our being here, among other things, is self-acquaintance. If I can hear myself talk right now, which I am personally doing right now, I'm not only aware of what I am doing, but aware of how you are responding to me. This is self-acquaintance to me. And when you do it, it's self-acquaintance to you, to understand ourselves. Because when I talk mechanically, when you talk unconsciously with wrong motives, then you don't know you're talking unconsciously with wrong motives. And you might even run it through your mind after your question is stopped and applaud yourself for saying what you said, especially if you get a laugh or a lot of nods from people. So the whole purpose of this is to understand ourselves and the other person better without any criticism, condemnation of anyone, yourself or the other person, but simply to see what is going on. Any questions or comments on this? Okay. All right, what would you like to talk about? Anything you'd like to talk about? Don't strain to ask a question. We had a lot of points last night. We have a lot of points all day long, I'm sure, that we could discuss. Now remember, and this is the last time I'll mention it, until maybe at the end, I'll see. This is the last time I'll mention the main project. Also going along with this at the same time is the benefit we might get from exchanging thoughts and ideas, from exchanging with each other. That's certainly always beneficial, but we want to add more to that. So see what happens between right now at 9:15 on this Saturday morning and when we leave. Yes?
The comment you first started about gently and sternly speaking,
Yes.
and as you went through that, we are caught kind of in a trap of respectability then in society. In other words, doing that which is respectable.
Yes. Quite right.
And it becomes a trap.
Quite right. It becomes a stage performance, doesn't it?
Okay.
Which does not mean we're rude in public or tell other people off. That's just another form of egotism, of course. Yes, Larry.
Could you talk a little more, Vernon, on our reaching for the wrong reaction? Reaching for the wrong reaction.
Reaching for the wrong reaction. Well, we reach for the wrong reaction because it's the only thing we know to do. Because we're asleep, if you're bawled out by something, automatically. Now, what's so mysterious about that? This is all I have ever known is a wrong reaction. And you can come to this class for years and still go into the wrong reaction because you are talking about observing yourself. You are thinking about interrupting yourself. Can't you see a wrong reaction when it is wrong, at the time it's wrong? Can't you see your tension when you make a wrong reaction? Not necessarily in this, anywhere out there. Can't you see the tension in yourself, the anxiety, wondering whether you have made a goof and what punishment you'll get from it, for example? Can't you see that? I want to see the wrong reaction so that I'm no longer enslaved by it. And we're going to be, as I said last night, very tough with ourselves. Unsparing. Not playing the game, the internal drama with ourselves of self-protection, among other things. of loving our misery, how you love your misery. I see it right here in this room, how you love to cry. This is your world now. You understand, let me see your hands, please. Do you understand that the person you exhibit exteriorly is not at all the same person you are interiorly? Do you understand that? Now, do you know what self-contradiction means? I know that there's a big difference. Do you know it? I know what hatred some of you in this room are capable of. Now, isn't that helpful for me to know that? Now you know it, so you can help yourself. I know how vicious you can be. Oh, if you could get away with it, you would actually physically assault another person. You would. And that's very deeply buried in your mind. That's very unacceptable to your image of being a nice person. Haven't you ever watched yourself go wild at times? You know, usually by yourself. Go mad? How many of you went mad this last week? All by yourself when no one was looking. The rest of you could raise your hands too. Don't you know what, yes, just 1 second, please. Don't you know what suffering is? Suffering is to have the tiger down in there without seeing it and talking about all these nice things that we talk about in class. Do you want to get rid of the tiger or not? Obviously not. The tiger is still very valuable to you because it's fun to growl. It's fun to attack. It's fun to claw at people. What power I had to claw at you mentally if I can't do it physically. What fun. What delusion. What destruction. All right. This is all you know? Okay. We're teaching you something different here. We're teaching you that you don't have to be a tiger in order to exist. You don't have to be a tiger in order to exist properly. Die to the tiger and exist properly. Lay down your old life for the sake of truth so that you'll have the new life. So that you really be born again. This is what we're after, to be born again, the same thing Christ was talking about. Which is not imagination. When you really know it, it will not be imagination, because you've seen the pain of living in imagination, of having mastered these spiritual principles, of having changed yourself inwardly. You're tired of the imagination of it, because you're still scared. If you're imagining it, you're still scared. And you're still weak. You're afraid to let go. You're afraid what is going to happen to you as a consequence of embracing the truth wholly. You're afraid of the consequence of what's going to happen to you. Who's it happening to, right? Who's it going to happen to? Nobody. It'll happen to your imaginations about yourself and to nothing else. It'll happen, the consequences are very bad. They're terrible to your self-images of being who you are, which you don't see. In fact, it's their annihilation. Tremendous. That's what we want. Yes, please. Yes, Lily.
You know, it's amazing that, for example, even two married people even stay together as long as they do, or friends or anything, because you take in an ordinary conversation, there is the image I'm portraying, the image I really am psychologically, and the image I'm looking through at the other person, and they're doing the same thing. So right there are 6 images going on, and it's a wonder that everything doesn't get completely out of control.
Think of any human relationship you have. Pick out one single individual, make it clearer. Think of one individual, anyone really, but fairly close to it, that you have a relationship in some way or other, marriage, whatever, you think of that person. And you think of yourself in relation to that person. Now you ask, very simple, don't complicate it. How real is this relationship? How free can I be with that person or he with me, for example? Or do I very, very carefully choose my words and my manners and my facial expression and my behavior in general toward this person? Because I'm afraid to get out of the role that I'm playing toward him or her, because I fear I might lose something both internally and externally. You know what we're afraid of? We're afraid of being real. Afraid of being real, which, as I said, it does not mean telling the other person off. It means being real regardless of how that other person will react. And you have to have the courage to bear the wrong reaction of that other person, which he's going to do, which she is going to do. Because you're not playing the game. You're not being respectable anymore. You're being real. Wouldn't you rather be real than respectable? Then you make it your personal project to be real in yourself. Never mind the other person. You be real, and you will know how to behave toward him or her. You'll not compromise anymore. Then let him or her go if they want to go. Their reaction is nothing to you. You're not responsible for it. You're not guilty for hurting them. I said you're not guilty for hurting them. You're being real. You have no responsibility for anyone else. You have responsibility for being true. When you are, you will have right responsibilities on every level, socially and higher, to every other person on earth. Yes, Lillian.
You said be real, because if one tries to be real, they're going to create more problems.
Sure. Okay, sure. We do have to make an effort to be real as long as we're on the level of thought. And then afterward, we see our mistake. We saw that we could have gone directly. In theory, we can go directly, but we can't actually, because thought stands in the way. We have to get that out of the way. Yeah.
I am not my brother's keeper.
All right. Okay, fine. You are not. Yeah, that's quite right. Okay. Now, what does that mean?
I am not
How many? Just a minute. I see you're hot.
Yeah.
Just, cool down. How many of you feel that you are your brother's keeper and are playing that role? Don't you wish you were out of it? Higher, Dorothy? Try it again. That's better. You were lovely. Lillian, before you burst.
Well, if I say I'm not my brother's keeper, and in this awareness, in this silence, I am my brother's keeper in a much bigger way, because I'm responsible only for myself, and in that responsibility there is something else. But when I say I'm not my brother's keeper, there again, like trying to be real, I create all kinds of problems for myself and for him.
Okay. I'm not referring to Lily in particular, but all of us. What beautiful words we speak in here. Aren't they beautiful, though? All right. Now, how many of you dominate another human being? Huh? Come on now, don't lie. What beautiful words you speak in here, and you go right out and tyrannize somebody. Don't you have the courage to stop tyrannizing somebody?
The mind can think that if it just has enough answers, it can never be cornered. But in that very thinking, it corners itself.
So say that all over again, please.
Okay?
As best
The
you can.
mind can think. If it just has enough answers, it will never be cornered by another person, by an exterior event.
That's very good, yes.
But the very
Yeah.
thinking
Yes.
is my own cornering, so to speak, enclosure.
We can. Are you through? I didn't know. I didn't mean to be. By the way, let me say something. When you're through, please be through. You know what? Do you know what a period is at the end of a sentence? Put them in your talk, so I will know that you're through. If it's a comma, act like it's a comma, then I'll shut up too. Then we won't interrupt each other. We can come here in this class trying to get answers on the level of ordinary thought. Answers what? Wrong answers that please us, that we think will get us to heaven eventually or whatever. All this is still on the level of desiring an answer that will keep what I think is me in place, and which is no answer at all. Which is why, to use words to say it, we have to give up trying to find the answers altogether. Any answer that keeps what I call me in place is no answer at all, but another delusion.
Would you say that again?
Any answers that we seek in this class that contribute to keeping the false sense of self in place is a delusion. But you have to see this. Any answer that conforms to what I want, to how I think you should behave toward me, or how I think God should behave toward me. Any answer that has a demand in it, that has a hope in it. Any answer that hopes that this is what that man will answer the way what I want him to answer, in order to confirm that I understand the truth and I'm on the right track and all that. Anything that I want to please my egotism. We're here to find things that displease our egotism. Right? Which will give us the shock, which will give us the sternness, which will give us the emotion which we can observe. You know, the time can come, and I know that to some degree it has happened in this class. You know it too. You know it. There's no delusion about this. Where something was said by me or by someone else, you felt knew was right. You didn't have to think about it at all. You knew it was right. That kind of pleasing is right pleasing. That's pleasing God. That's pleasing truth. And by the way, if you really want to please yourself, please truth. What's the difference? If you really want to please yourself, please truth. I am the truth. You are the truth. Understand? No? Yes? Lillian?
I was just going to say, if you want to say, Lillian, stop using beautiful words and try living your life, that's fine, because I know you're talking to me anyway.
Partly, but don't get too exclusive about it. Just listen to other people. Of course we mean you. We also mean Mark because he doesn't speak up and use any kind of words. 1, 2. Yes. Yeah. Did you have your hand?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. See, I'm still trying to get,
Try it.
understand what you're, in essence, I'm trying to understand what you're saying, and as I am trying to communicate with you, you're telling me stop seeking.
Mm-hmm. What are you seeking? What do you
Just
want?
what you said. Just what you said. Something that is pleasing to me, to the ego. Something with an end. And you're telling me stop that.
Yes, right. What did we say last night, in part, and this morning for that matter? Keep yourself totally unanchored, not knowing where you're going, not knowing who you are, being desperate, but not trying to reduce the desperation by seeking for an answer. Stay desperate. How's that for something? Write that down. Stay desperate. And then, was that you, Joan?
No, I was.
Who had their hand up?
My hand, well, I raised it.
Okay.
I know that when I try what I call too desperately, I get in the way.
Correct. You prefer to be frantic than to be true. You prefer to be frantic than to be true. Why don't you just give up being frantic? Why don't you just drop it right now? Right now. Just drop it. Why do you cherish your frantic states? Because they are you, quote marks. Let's take a short break.
Commenting on our project for the day, namely to rate ourselves whether we were absorbing our lessons superbly, fairly, or dumbly, and said that, gee, it doesn't seem to me that we can do anything superbly, to which I responded, gee, what a shame it is that the thing I'm capable of doing superbly is so frowned upon by society.
Aren't the images wonderful? Aren't the images wonderful?
Well,
Forget it.
yeah. During the break, Juan brought Joan some letters, and among one of them was a letter which made Joan jump around gleefully. And so we agreed to let her read it out loud to you. I don't know why. Let's find out why.
It's addressed to the Vernon Howard Study Group. Dear Sirs, for Christmas I received 2 of Vernon Howard's paperback books.
Oh, hold it a minute. Would you take that down?
Yes.
Dear Sirs, for Christmas I received 2 of Vernon Howard's paperback books. I'm so excited I can shout the good news from the rooftop. I want to thank Mr. Howard for sharing his ideas with others. I know what has been said is truth and applies to our life. I know what has been said is truth and applies to our life has been such a challenge for me, plus many others. These books are not available locally, so could you please send me the following? And she ordered 10 of the paperback books. I'm enclosing $10 for 10 books, and please send them via airmail, all underlined. $2 extra is included in my $12 check. Does Mr. Howard have a study group in Honolulu, Hawaii? Aloha Pumahana. Nancy Kaun, K-A-U-N. Ah.
He's a friend of
mine. Okay, and she wrote out the check to the Vernon Howard Study Group. $12, 12 blessed dollars, and no cents.
Truth is a waiter. Waiter. Is that the way a man who gives you food in the same
Yeah.
thing? Same spelling? Well, I don't mean that. Truth is a waiter. Truth waits. You're given something in this class, and truth waits to see what you do with it. If you don't handle it properly, truth will wait until you can handle it properly. What I'm saying is this. There comes a time when truth can't give you any more the next lesson until you've absorbed the one it has just given you. To put it another way, truth has given you all you can take for now, and it stops. The next initiative is yours, not the wrong kind of initiative to want the truth in order to get something, for quote, you from it, but for the sake of truth alone. And truth knows what is going on inside of us. It will not force itself on us. It will say, okay, something like this. I'm using a figure of speech, of course. You've been given as much as you can take. I'm just going to sit here and wait till you can handle it properly. Then I will give you the next lesson, and not before. Falsehood will keep going with you to keep conning you. Truth will not. It will stop. It's up to you. What are you going to do next? Understand?
The patience of truth, comma, is unbelievable, comma, to us at this time, period.
Beautiful patience. Yes. We're disturbed. Truth is not disturbed by our disturbance. How could it be truth that was anxious over whether we're making progress or not? We project that onto truth, maybe. That was a close race. One.
Vernon, in self-observation, I still suspect that I am still just thinking about it and not actually. Is this
Correct.
kind of a prelude to?
Yes, because you're questioning your own sincerity, your own actuality of what you're doing, instead of swallowing it whole that you're working on yourself. You know, any of these so-called esoteric groups, most of them are no better than your Christian, so-called Christian churches, where you identify with this man who wrote these wonderful books, which may indeed be wonderful books, but you're all talking about observing yourself, levels of being, and all, telling the difference between truth and falsehood, and you're just talking about it. And anyone who has even a slightly higher level of being than you have knows it, because they can see as they pass by, you've gone out to your car and they see you talking, and just in 1 second they can see that you're simply following the words instead of having the being, because you're both waiting for the other person to stop talking out there. Very much let us suspect how insincere we are, how we want to talk instead of doing the hard thing. We're here to do the hard work, not to lull ourselves to sleep with words. Leland?
Last night, you remarked, so you want someone to love you. No one is ever going to love you because you want them to. Would you comment on that further, please?
All right, let's start. Why do any of you in this room want any other human being to love you? Let's go further back. What are you talking about when you say you want some other human being to love you? Let's go further back. What do you mean by love? Huh? Wanting someone to love you is simply an indication that you still think you exist. Therefore, you exist as someone who is worthy of being loved, or I hope someone might eventually love me. And so you'll con him or her, and you'll end up hating each other. Yes.
All it is a bunch of ideas I have about either myself or someone else.
Of course. Of course. Now look, let's go back to something. Nod your heads, please. Isn't it terrible to play the game with another person? Isn't it better to lose him or her than play the game with him or her? Isn't it better? Isn't it better to lose our own life for the sake of truth rather than continue the game? Lily.
This is a very deep conditioning, though. All society is based upon it, that you need someone for fulfillment and completeness. In other words, saying that we're not full or complete in ourselves, so the whole idea, as society knows it, of marriage is based upon the wrong thing.
Correct. Yes.
Then you were saying it's the me that wants some preconceived idea.
The me in quote marks. Yeah, right. Which wants the other person to say, I love you, in order to confirm the image that I am me. Which now we're playing games with each other, see? Love is very tough. Christ was the most, possibly, we don't know, the most tough human being who ever lived on this earth. Tough? Oh, good heavens. Which is love.
I've noticed how that I never just like a person. I have to tell myself first that I like them or that I love them. In other words, I just don't like them. I have to tell my person. That tells me that I've got all these different things that I've added up that shows me how much I do like them.
Yeah, when we tell someone we love them, let's be conscious of what we're saying and see what is our motive for it. Hopefully, he will say the same thing back to me. Right? Why don't you have a good relationship with someone and dare not to use the word love at all, unless you could use it consciously, which you can't. Not to use the word love at all and run the risk of him or her not saying the same thing to you. And of course there's obviously a special departmentalized relationship between a man and a woman, and another relationship between two men or two women. Love being one thing above this, but then it does express itself in different ways, doesn't it? You behave toward your wife different than toward another man, for example. The love is the same. The expression of it in your particular situation is different. Because you're in a physical body, for one thing. Are you scared by your own sins? Huh? Why don't you find out what that is all about? All these evil thoughts you have? All these violent thoughts, all these sex thoughts, which even you can't see because they're too shocking to you. Why don't you see them for a change, so that you can call their bluff and not be scared by them anymore, so that you're free of it, so that you can behave intelligently sexually, for example. Put your attention back on yourself and see yourself sitting in this room looking at me. You're looking at me, now see yourself. See yourself looking at me. You see the difference? Can you feel something?